The rain had just stopped when he stepped inside, the kind of soft Portland drizzle that leaves the air smelling like wet earth and old books. He hadn't planned on stopping. His driver was waiting 2 blocks away, his schedule packed tight with back-to-back meetings about market expansion and quarterly losses. But something about the warm glow spilling from the cafe window pulled him in. Maybe it was the way the steam curled from the chimney-like vent above the door, or the hand-painted sign that read, "The Wren and Whisk" in looping cursive. Or maybe it was just exhaustion. 8 years of climbing a ladder that never seemed to end had left him hollow in a way no promotion could fill. He pushed the door open, and a bell chimed softly overhead. The place was small but full of life. Wooden shelves lined with second-hand paperbacks, mismatched armchairs tucked into corners, the low hum of conversation blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. The scent hit him first. Dark roast coffee, buttery croissants, and something sweet. Cinnamon maybe, or vanilla. It wrapped around him like a memory he couldn't quite place. Then he saw her. She stood behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine with a cloth, her movements calm and practiced. Her hair was shorter now, pulled back in a loose bun, but he'd know that curve of her jaw anywhere. She looked older, more grounded somehow, but still carried that quiet strength he'd always admired. And then she turned. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the whole cafe seemed to freeze. The chatter faded. The coffee machine stopped hissing. Even the rain outside held its breath. Her hand stilled on the machine. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. He felt his own chest tighten, like someone had reached in and squeezed his ribs. He hadn't seen her since that night in their tiny apartment, the one with the leaky faucet and the futon that never quite unfolded right. The night he'd packed a single suitcase and walked out without looking back. He'd told himself it was for the best. That he wasn't ready. That his father's ultimatum, cut ties or lose the family business, left him no choice. But standing here now, in this warm, lived-in space she'd clearly built with her own hands, he felt the full weight of what he'd thrown away. He took a step forward, then another, his polished shoes clicking softly against the hardwood floor. He didn't know what to say. I felt too small. I'm sorry, felt too late. So he just stood there, awkwardly holding his briefcase like a shield. She recovered first. Her expression shifted, surprise giving way to something harder, more guarded. She set the cloth down and crossed her arms lightly over her apron. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice low but steady. "I know," he replied, his throat dry. "I didn't plan to come. I'm in town for work. Saw the cafe. Thought I'd grab a coffee." She nodded slowly, eyes scanning his face as if checking for lies. "Well, it's just coffee. Nothing else," he swallowed. "Right." Before he could say more, a small voice piped up from a corner table near the window. "Mama, can I have more milk?" Both of them turned. A little girl sat there, maybe 6 or 7, her dark curls spilling over the back of a too-big sweater. She had a coloring book open in front of her, crayons scattered like confetti. She looked up, her big eyes curious, and then they landed on him. She blinked, then her face changed. Not fear, not confusion, but something like recognition, as if a puzzle piece had just clicked into place. She tilted her head, studying him the way kids do when they're trying to figure out if someone's telling the truth. And then, clear as a bell, she said, "Daddy?" The word hung in the air like smoke. He froze. His heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought she might hear it. He looked at the girl, really looked, and saw it then. The shape of her eyes, the slight tilt of her nose, the way her eyebrows arched when she was thinking. She had his eyes, green flecked with gold, and her smile, when she gave a shy little grin, was his mother's, the one he'd only seen in old photos. He turned to the woman behind the counter, searching her face for answers. Her expression had gone pale. She looked stricken, like she'd been caught in a lie she never meant to tell. She opened her mouth, closed it, then rushed over to the little girl's side. "Lily," she said gently, crouching down so they were eye level. "That's not—" But Lily wasn't listening. She was still staring at him, her small hands resting on the table. "You look like the picture," she said simply. The woman, Elena, went very still. "What picture?" "The one in your drawer. The one with you and the man by the lake. You said he was—" "My dad." Elena's breath hitched. She glanced at him, her eyes full of warning, apology, and something else. Grief, maybe, or fear. She stood slowly, straightening her apron as if it could armor her against this moment. He didn't move. He couldn't. All the years of silence, of pretending he hadn't left a life behind, crashed over him like a wave. He'd wondered, of course. Late at night, after too much whiskey, he'd imagine a child, maybe a boy who loved baseball or a girl who asked too many questions. But he'd never dared to ask, never dared to hope, and now here she was, real and breathing and calling him Daddy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He took a shaky breath. Is she? Elena nodded once, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she's yours. The words landed like stones. He felt dizzy. He wanted to drop to his knees to hug this child he'd never known existed, to beg forgiveness for every birthday, every scraped knee, every bedtime story he'd missed. But he stayed rooted, afraid that any sudden move might shatter this fragile moment. Lily, meanwhile, seemed unfazed by the tension thickening the air. She swung her legs under the table and smiled again. Do you like hot chocolate? She asked him. He blinked. I do. Mama makes the best. With real whipped cream. Elena let out a soft, shaky laugh, half relief, half despair. She ran a hand through her hair, looking between him and Lily like she was trying to decide which fire to put out first. He stepped closer, slowly, keeping his voice gentle. What's your name? Lily, she said proudly. Like the flower. And the bird, the wren? He asked, glancing at the cafe's name painted above the door. She nodded. Mama says wrens are small but brave. He looked at Elena then, really looked at her, not as the ghost of his past, but as the woman who'd raised his daughter alone. Who'd built this place, this life without him? There was pride in her posture, but also exhaustion in the lines around her eyes. She'd carried this secret, this weight, for years. I didn't know, he said quietly so only she could hear. If I had... I know, she cut in, her voice firm but not unkind. But you're here now. He didn't know what that meant, whether it was an accusation or an invitation. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away again. Lily hopped down from her chair and walked over to him, stopping just an arm's length away. She tilted her head again, studying him with the unblinking curiosity only children possess. Then she reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled drawing. I made this today, she said, holding it out. He took it carefully, as if it were made of glass. It was a picture of a family, a woman with long hair and a big smile, a little girl with curly hair holding a bird, and a tall man with green eyes standing beside them, holding a cup of coffee. Above them, in wobbly letters, it read, My family. His vision blurred. He cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. It's beautiful, Lily, she beamed. Do you live far away? Pretty far, he admitted, but maybe not as far as I thought. Elena watched them, her arms crossed again, but her expression had softened. She wasn't smiling, not yet, but the hard edge in her eyes had dulled. She walked back to the counter and picked up a clean mug. Without a word, she filled it with steaming hot chocolate, topped it with a swirl of whipped cream, and brought it over. For you, she said, handing it to Lily. Then, after a pause, she turned to him. Black coffee? Or something stronger? He almost laughed. Old habits even after all this time. Black coffee, please. She nodded and went back to the machine. As she worked, he stayed by Lily's side, sipping the coffee she handed him moments later. Perfectly brewed, just how he used to like it. He didn't ask how she remembered. Maybe she didn't. Maybe it was just instinct. Lily chattered happily about her school, her favorite books, the stray cat she'd been feeding behind the cafe. He listened, soaking in every word, every gesture. He noticed how she tucked her hair behind her ear the same way Elena did, how she scrunched her nose when she laughed. These were pieces of himself he never knew existed, living and breathing right in front of him. Outside, the sky began to darken. The cafe emptied slowly, customers leaving with paper cups and quiet goodbyes. Soon it was just the three of them, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Elena wiped down the counter one last time and turned to face him. You should go, she said, but it wasn't harsh. It was practical. Your driver's probably wondering where you are. He glanced at his watch. He was already late, but for the first time in years, being late didn't matter. I'll come back, he said. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him. Really looked, as if trying to see whether the man standing before her was the same one who'd walked out all those years ago, or someone new. Finally, she nodded. Okay, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't welcome. but it was a door left slightly ajar. As he stepped back out into the cool evening air, the city lights reflecting in the wet pavement, he felt something shift inside him. The hollow space he'd carried for so long didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, of fear, yes, but also of possibility. And for the first time in 8 years, he didn't look back with regret. He looked forward. The next morning, the cafe was quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the scent of fresh bread hung in the air like a promise. Elena moved through her usual routine, grinding beans, wiping counters, checking the pastry case. But her mind kept drifting back to the night before, to the way he'd stood there, stunned and speechless as their daughter called him Daddy, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Like she'd been waiting for him all along. She hadn't planned for this. She'd spent years building walls around her heart, around Lily's life, around the truth. She told herself it was protection, that Lily didn't need the confusion of a father who vanished before she was born, that some silences were kinder than explanations. But last night, those walls had cracked open without warning, and now she didn't know how to patch them back together. Lily, for her part, seemed unfazed. She sat at the same corner table, coloring in a new picture. A tall man with green eyes holding a coffee cup, standing beside a wren perched on a branch. "Is he coming back today?" she'd asked over breakfast, buttering her toast with careful concentration. Elena had paused, stirring her tea too long. "I don't know, sweetheart." But he said he would. He might. Lily accepted that with the easy trust only children possess. She didn't understand the weight of broken promises or the ache of waiting for someone who never shows up. She just believed what she was told. And that scared Elena more than anything. She glanced at the clock. 10 minutes until opening. She took a deep breath and tied her apron tighter, as if it could hold everything inside her in place. Across town, he sat in a sleek conference room on the 23rd floor of a glass tower, staring at a spreadsheet he couldn't focus on. His phone buzzed, another reminder about the investor call in 15 minutes. But his thoughts were miles away. Back in that warm little cafe with the bookshelves and the little girl who looked just like him. He remembered the night Elena told him she was pregnant. They'd been sitting on their fire escape, sharing a bag of stale chips, laughing about nothing. Then she'd gone quiet, twisting the ring on her finger, the cheap silver one he'd given her for their 1-year anniversary. "I think I'm pregnant," she'd said, voice barely above a whisper. He'd felt joy first, pure, bright joy. Then panic. His father had been breathing down his neck about getting serious with his career, about cutting out distractions, and Elena, with her part-time job at the campus library and dreams of opening her own place someday, was definitely a distraction in his father's eyes. 2 weeks later, his father called him into his office. "You have a choice," he'd said, not unkindly, but with the calm certainty of someone used to getting his way. "Stay with her and walk away from the company, or do what's expected of you." There's no middle ground. He'd chosen the company, chosen the future that had been mapped out for him since childhood. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd figure something out, send money, come back when things settled. But then his father doubled down, cutting off his trust fund, threatening to disinherit him entirely. Fear took over. And so one rainy night he packed a single suitcase, left a note that said only, "I'm sorry, I can't," and disappeared. He never called. Never wrote. He told himself she was better off without him, that she'd find someone who could give her the life she deserved. But deep down he always wondered, did she keep the baby? Was it a boy or a girl? Did they ever think of him? Now he knew, and the guilt sat in his chest like a stone. After the meeting, a blur of numbers and nods, he told his assistant he needed the afternoon off. No explanation. Just, "I'll be unreachable." He drove back to the neighborhood himself this time, parking a few blocks away so he wouldn't seem too eager, too desperate. But he was both. The cafe was open. Through the window he saw Elena behind the counter, laughing with a regular customer. She looked tired but calm. And then he saw Lily, sitting at her usual spot, this time reading a picture book with a stuffed bird tucked under her arm. He took a breath and walked in. The bell chimed. Elena looked up. Her smile faded the moment she saw him, but she didn't look away. She just nodded as if she'd been expecting him. Lily looked up too, and her face lit up. "You came back." I did, he said, walking over to her table. He didn't sit, not yet. I brought you something. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. I saw them in a shop this morning. They reminded me of your drawings. Lily took them carefully, her eyes wide. Really for me? Really for you. She hugged the sketchbook to her chest like it was treasure. Thank you, Daddy. The word still sent a jolt through him, but this time it felt less like a shock and more like a key turning in a lock. Elena watched from the counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He met her gaze and held it. Can we talk? After you close? She hesitated, then gave a small nod. 6 o'clock. Everyone's gone by then. He stayed for an hour. Didn't order anything, just sat with Lily, asking gentle questions about school, her favorite books, the bird she'd named Pip. She told him about the stray cat she fed, the tree she climbed behind the cafe, the way Mama let her pick the music on slow afternoons. He listened, really listened, storing every detail like precious coins. When it was time to go, Lily walked him to the door. Will you come tomorrow too? I'll try, he said honestly. But if I can't, I'll let you know, okay? She nodded seriously. Okay. Back in his hotel room, he dug out an old shoebox from the bottom of his suitcase, the one he never unpacked, the one that held the few things he couldn't throw away. Inside was a faded photo, him and Elena standing by a lake during their last summer together. She was laughing, her head thrown back, sunlight catching in her hair. He was holding her hand, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. He stared at it for a long time. Then he placed it on the nightstand next to his phone. That night, after the cafe closed and Lily was asleep in the small apartment above the shop, Elena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea gone cold. She thought about the early days, the months after he left, how she'd cried until she was empty, then gotten up and gone to her shift at the diner because rent was due, how she'd hidden her pregnancy as long as she could, wearing oversized sweaters even in summer, how her mother had shown up one day with a suitcase and said, I'm staying until that baby's in your arms, and never left. She'd been terrified, alone, but also fiercely determined. She'd finished her degree at night, worked double shifts, saved every penny. When Lily was born, tiny, red-faced, perfect, she'd whispered, we're going to be okay, and meant it with every bone in her body. She never told Lily who her father was. Not because she hated him, though there were days she did, but because she didn't want her daughter to grow up waiting for someone who might never come back. She wanted Lily to feel whole on her own, not defined by an absence, but now he was here, and Lily had called him Daddy before Elena could even decide how to explain any of it. At 6 sharp, he knocked on the cafe's back door. She let him in without a word and led him to a small table near the kitchen. The cafe was dark except for a single lamp, casting long shadows on the walls. He sat across from her, hands folded on the table. I owe you an explanation, he said quietly. You owe me a lot, she replied, but there was no venom in it. Just weariness, he nodded. I know. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I need you to know why I left. And so he told her about his father's ultimatum, the pressure, the fear of failing everyone. He didn't make excuses. He didn't say he was young and stupid, though he was. He just laid it bare. The shame, the regret, the years of silence that grew heavier with time. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, you could have called. Sent a letter. Even a postcard, anything. I was ashamed, he admitted, and scared you'd tell me to stay away. Or worse, that you'd say you didn't want me involved. I wouldn't have, she said softly. Not for me. But for her, I didn't know if you'd stick around, and I couldn't risk her getting attached to someone who might disappear again. He looked down at his hands. I understand. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the distant hum of the refrigerator. Lily's never asked about her father, Elena said finally. Not really. She knew there was a picture. She knew you existed, but I never gave her details. I thought it was safer that way. She's smart, he said. She put it together the second she saw me. Elena smiled faintly. She's always been good at seeing what's real. He took a breath. I don't expect to be a dad overnight, but I'd like to try to be in her life, however you'll let me. Elena studied him, the lines on his face, the tiredness in his eyes. The way he kept glancing toward the stairs that led to their apartment, as if hoping to hear Lily's voice. He wasn't the same boy who'd walked out. Time had carved something deeper into him. "Start small," she said at last. "Come by, talk to her. Read to her. Don't make promises you can't keep. And don't expect her to call you daddy just because she did once." He nodded. "Fair enough." Before he left, he turned at the door. "Thank you," he said, "for raising her, for giving her a good life." Elena looked at him, her eyes glistening but dry. "She's my joy, not a burden. I didn't do it for you." "I know," he said, "but I'm grateful anyway." That night, as rain fell again outside, Elena tucked Lily into bed. The little girl was already half asleep, clutching her new sketchbook. "Did Daddy used to live here?" she murmured. "No, sweetheart. But he's getting to know us now. Is he nice?" Elena smoothed her daughter's curls. "I think he's trying to be." Upstairs in his hotel room, he opened his laptop and typed a single email to his assistant. "Cancel my return flight. I'm staying in Portland longer." Then he picked up the photo from the lake and looked at it for a long time. Not with regret, but with a quiet kind of hope. He had a lot to make up for. But for the first time, he had a reason to try. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, like the slow drip of coffee through a filter. Steady, predictable, but full of hidden depth. He came by the cafe every afternoon, always at the same time, always without fanfare. Sometimes he brought Lily a new colored pencil or a small notebook with birds sketched on the cover. Other times he just sat with her while she drew, asking gentle questions about her pictures, listening more than he spoke. He never pushed, never acted like he owned a place in her life. He just showed up. Elena watched from behind the counter, arms often crossed, expression unreadable. She didn't stop him, but she didn't welcome him either. She let him exist in the space between guest and family, like a shadow learning to walk in daylight. Lily, for her part, seemed to accept him as easily as she accepted the rain or the morning sun. She called him Daddy less often now, not because she'd changed her mind, but because it had become so ordinary it didn't need saying. She'd wave when he walked in, scoot her chair over to make room, and chatter about her day like he'd always been there. And maybe in her mind he had been. Children don't measure time in years. They measure it in moments, shared cookies, bedtime stories, the way someone looks at them when they laugh. But Elena knew better. She knew time left scars, and trust once broken didn't heal in a week. One rainy Thursday, the cafe was nearly empty. Lily was upstairs napping, and Elena was restocking shelves when he walked in, looking more tired than usual. He ordered black coffee, same as always, and sat at the corner table, staring out the window like he was searching for something in the gray sky. After a while, Elena brought him a fresh cup. "You look like you haven't slept." He gave a small, tired smile. "Not much. Work's been complicated." She leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You're still working from here?" "Trying to. My team thinks I've lost my mind." "Maybe I have." She almost laughed. "Almost. Why stay then?" He looked at her, really looked. And for the first time she saw something raw in his eyes, not guilt, not regret, but longing. "Because I finally found something worth staying for." She didn't answer right away. She just watched the steam curl from his cup. "You can't just waltz back in and expect everything to be fine," she said quietly. "Lily's not a do-over. She's a person, and I've spent 6 years protecting her from disappointment." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking to take over. I want to be part of her life. However you'll let me." She studied him, the way his shoulders slumped slightly, the new lines around his eyes, the way he kept glancing toward the stairs like he could hear Lily breathing through the floorboards. He wasn't the same man who'd walked out all those years ago. That man had been scared, selfish, trapped in someone else's expectations. This one seemed softer, like he'd finally stopped running. Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed. A woman walked in, late 50s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a bright yellow raincoat. She carried a canvas tote bag full of library books. Elena's face lit up instantly. "Mama," she said, walking over to hug her. The woman, her mother, smiled warmly, then turned and saw him. Her expression shifted. Not hostile, but cautious. She'd heard the stories. She'd been there the night he left. She'd held Elena while she sobbed into her shoulder, promising, "He's not worth your tears now." Here he was sitting in her daughter's cafe like he belonged. "Hello," he said, standing politely. The older woman nodded slowly. "So, you're back." "I am." She didn't say more. Just turned to Elena. "I brought the empanadas you like. Fresh from the oven." "Thank you," Elena said, relief washing over her. She introduced him simply. "This is Lily's father." Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't argue. She just set the bag on the counter and said, "I'll check on my granddaughter. She's due to wake up soon." As she climbed the stairs, Elena turned back to him. "My mother doesn't trust easily." "I wouldn't expect her to." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Elena sighed. "You should meet Lily properly, not just as the man who brings sketchbooks." She's starting to ask questions. "Like what? Why didn't you live with us? Did you know I was born? Do you love Mama?" She crossed her arms again, voice tight. "I don't know how to answer those." He looked down, shame flickering across his face. "Tell her the truth. That I was young and scared. That I made a terrible mistake. That I love her even if I didn't know her at first." Elena exhaled slowly. "Love isn't enough if it doesn't show up." "I'm showing up now." "Now," she repeated, tasting the word like it might be bitter. "But what about next month, next year? When your job calls you back to Seattle? When things get hard?" He met her gaze. "I've already told my company I'm stepping back. Taking a leave of absence? I'm not going anywhere." She blinked, surprised. "You did that? For her? For both of you?" he said softly. "For the life I walked away from." Upstairs, Lily's voice floated down, bright and clear. "Abuela, is that Daddy downstairs?" Elena's mother appeared at the top of the stairs, holding Lily's hand. "Yes, mija. He's here." Lily skipped down the steps, still in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep. She stopped when she saw him and grinned. "You stayed." "I did," he said, crouching so they were eye level. "Your abuela brought empanadas. Want to share one?" She nodded eagerly, and he took her hand. Tentatively at first, then with more confidence when she didn't pull away. They sat at the table together, breaking the warm pastry into pieces, laughing when crumbs fell on the floor. Elena watched them, her chest tight. It looked so natural, so easy, like it was supposed to be this way all along. Later that evening, after her mother left and Lily was tucked back in bed, Elena sat alone at the counter nursing a cup of tea. He lingered by the door, coat in hand. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. Why didn't you tell me? About Lily all those years. You could have reached out." She looked down at her tea. "I tried once," he froze. "What?" "About a year after you left. I found your work email through an old classmate. I sent a message. Just a few lines. Said I was okay, that I was keeping the baby, that I wasn't asking for anything, just wanted you to know." She paused. It came back undelivered. Address no longer active. He stared at her, stunned. "I never got it. I figured as much. After that, I stopped trying. I told myself you didn't want to know. And maybe it was easier that way." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and grief twisting in his voice. "If I'd known, but you didn't," she said gently. "And now you do. So what are you going to do with that?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, his eyes full of everything he couldn't say. The next day, Lily came downstairs with a question burning in her eyes. "Daddy," she said, pulling him aside while Elena wiped tables. "Are you and Mama getting married?" He nearly choked. "What?" "No, why would you think that?" "Because in my book, the Daddy and Mama live in the same house. And you come here every day." He knelt down. "Families don't all look the same, Lily. Some daddies and mamas live together. Some don't, but that doesn't mean they don't love their kids." She frowned. "But do you love Mama?" He glanced at Elena, who had gone very still. "I care about her," he said carefully. "Very much. But love is complicated." Lily accepted that with a shrug. "Okay, but you can still be my daddy, right?" "Yes," he said, voice thick. "Always." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Lily's question. The way he'd looked at her when he said he cared. She didn't want to hope. Hope had burned her before. But watching him with Lily, patient, present, never rushing, made something in her chest ache in a new way. A few days later, the cafe's roof started leaking during a storm. Water dripped into a bucket near the back shelf, ruining a stack of donated books. Elena groaned, dragging a towel over the puddle. I can't afford a roofer right now, she muttered to herself. The next morning he showed up with a toolbox and a ladder. What are you doing? She asked, arms crossed. Fixing the roof. You don't know how. I watched 3 YouTube videos last night. How hard can it be? She almost laughed. Almost. You're going to fall and break your neck. Then I'll fall and break my neck fixing something for you, he said simply. Let me try. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but wear the safety harness. He spent the whole day on the roof, slipping once, cursing softly, but never quitting. By evening, the leak was patched, the bucket empty. He came inside, soaked and muddy, and collapsed into a chair. Lily ran over with a towel. You fixed it. I did, he said, ruffling her hair. Elena handed him a dry shirt from the back. You're ridiculous, but useful? He asked, half smiling. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she didn't see the man who left. She saw the man who came back. Who stayed? Who climbed onto a wet roof just because she was stressed? Yeah, she said softly. Useful. That night, as she locked up the cafe, he walked her to the bottom of the stairs. Thank you, he said. For what? For letting me be here. She nodded, keys jingling in her hand. Don't make me regret it. I won't. And for the first time, she almost believed him. Weeks passed, and the rhythm between them settled into something quieter, more honest. He still came by the cafe every afternoon, but now he didn't just sit with Lily. He helped. He wiped down tables when the lunch rush ended, restocked sugar packets, even learned how to steam milk without burning it. At first, Elena watched him like she expected him to vanish the moment things got hard. But he didn't. He stayed through spilled coffee, broken mugs, and one chaotic Saturday when the espresso machine broke down and 3 customers complained at once. He just rolled up his sleeves and said, "Tell me what to do." Lily, meanwhile, had started calling him Dad instead of Daddy. A small shift, but it felt more real, more permanent. She'd leave drawings on his usual chair before he arrived, little notes that said things like, "Today I saw a blue jay," or "I made you a bookmark." He kept everyone, tucked into the inside pocket of his coat like sacred things. One evening, after closing, Elena found him sitting alone at the back table, staring at his phone with a frown. You okay? She asked, wiping her hands on her apron. He looked up, startled. Yeah, just my old boss called. Wants me back full-time. Big promotion. More money, more responsibility. She paused, the rag in her hand going still. And? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I told him I'd think about it. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she sat across from him. Do you want to go back? He looked toward the stairs, the ones that led to the apartment where Lily was probably coloring in bed, humming to herself. I used to think success meant corner offices and stock options. Now, I'm not so sure, she studied him. You've changed. I had to, he said quietly. I spent years trying to be the man my father wanted me to be. But that man wouldn't have known how to hold his daughter when she cried over a lost crayon, or how to sit in silence with someone who's hurting and just be there. Elena looked down at her hands. You don't have to stay just because of her. I'm not, he said gently. I'm staying because I finally figured out what matters. She didn't answer right away, but something in her shoulders relaxed just a little. A few days later, Lily came down with a fever. She was flushed and fussy, curled up on the couch with her stuffed bird, refusing soup, juice, even her favorite crackers. Elena sat beside her, pressing cool cloths to her forehead, reading the same storybook over and over until her voice grew hoarse. He showed up at the cafe door just before closing, holding a paper bag. I heard she's sick, he said. Brought ginger tea and honey. My mom swore by it. Elena let him in, too tired to argue. He didn't hover. Didn't try to take over. He just sat in the armchair across the room, quiet, present. When Lily whimpered in her sleep, he got up and adjusted the blanket without being asked. At one point, Lily opened her eyes and whispered, Dad? I'm here, he said softly. Will you stay till I fall asleep? He looked at Elena. She nodded, so he stayed. Long after the fever broke, long after Elena had gone to make more tea, he sat there holding Lily's small hand, watching her breathe. And in that quiet moment, he realized something. This was the life he'd been running from, not because it was small, but because it was real. And real things scared him once. The next morning, Lily was better, pale but smiling, demanding pancakes. He made them, slightly burnt but with extra blueberries, just how she liked them. Elena watched from the doorway, arms crossed, but there was no guard in her eyes anymore. Just something softer, like relief. Later that week, he asked if he could take Lily to the park on Saturday. Just the two of them. Elena hesitated. You sure? I want to. If it's okay with you. She thought about it. Really thought. Then she nodded. Be back by 4. She has story hour at the library. He showed up at noon with a backpack full of snacks, a soccer ball, and a brand new sketch pad. Lily bounced out the door, already chattering about the ducks at the pond. Elena stood in the doorway watching them walk down the street, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, her skipping beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. At the park, he didn't treat Lily like a stranger he was trying to impress. He let her lead. She showed him her favorite climbing tree, the bench where she fed pigeons, the patch of grass where she liked to lie and watch clouds. He listened to her theories about why birds sing and whether squirrels have best friends. He didn't correct her. Didn't rush her. Just let her be. At one point, she stopped and looked up at him. Do you think Mama's happy now? He crouched down. Why do you ask? Because before she used to look sad when she thought I wasn't watching. But now she smiles more. Especially when you're here. His throat tightened. I hope so, Lily. Do you love her? He took a breath. I care about her very much, and I'm trying to be someone she can trust. Lily nodded seriously. Good, because she deserves someone who stays. He didn't know what to say to that. So he just hugged her, tight and long, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and sunshine. When they got back to the cafe, Elena was waiting on the porch. Lily ran to her, full of stories about the park, the ducks, the cloud that looked like a dragon. Elena listened, smiling, then turned to him. Thank you, she said. For what? For being honest with her? For not making promises you can't keep? He nodded. She deserves the truth. That night, after Lily was asleep, Elena found him sitting on the back steps looking up at the stars. She sat beside him, handing him a mug of tea. You've been coming here every day for almost 2 months, she said. I know. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I finally understand what I lost, and what I might still have a chance to build. She looked at him, not as the ghost of her past, but as the man sitting beside her now. Tired, trying, real. You're not the same person, she said softly. No, he agreed. I'm not. She took a sip of tea. I started seeing a therapist last year, after Lily asked why her daddy wasn't in her school photos. He looked at her, surprised. I needed to figure out how to talk about you without it hurting her. Or me. She helped me see that I was holding on to anger like it was protecting me, but really it was just keeping me stuck. He nodded slowly. I started going too. After my father passed, I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn his approval, even when it cost me everything that mattered. They sat in silence for a while, the night air cool and quiet. You don't have to fix everything, she said finally. Just keep showing up. That's enough, he looked at her, eyes glistening. I will. The next week, something small but important happened. Lily was drawing at the counter while Elena made coffee. He walked in, damp from the rain, and Lily didn't look up right away. She just said without turning, You're late. He smiled. Traffic, she finally glanced at him. You forgot my pencil again. I did not, he said, pulling a new green pencil from his pocket, the exact shade she'd been asking for. I remembered. She grinned and went back to her drawing. Elena watched them, and for the first time she didn't feel like she was guarding a secret. She felt like she was sharing a life. One afternoon, a regular customer asked, So is he your husband now? Elena almost laughed. No, just Lily's dad. The woman nodded knowingly. Looks like he's sticking around. Looks like it, Elena said, and for the first time she said it without doubt. That evening, as he helped her close up, he paused by the bookshelf. You know, he said, I never thanked you properly. For what? For raising her alone. For giving her a home full of love even when I wasn't there. She looked down, blinking fast. I didn't do it for you. I know, he said gently. But I see it now. And I'm grateful, she met his eyes. Just keep being here. That's thanks enough, he nodded. And as he walked out into the evening light, he didn't look back, not with regret, but with quiet hope. because this wasn't about fixing the past anymore. It was about building something new, together. One honest day at a time. The morning of Lily's 7th birthday dawned soft and golden, the kind of spring day that smells like blooming jasmine and fresh-baked bread. Streamers hung from the cafe ceiling, handmade by Lily herself the night before. Red, yellow, and blue paper chains that swayed gently in the breeze from the open back door. A small table near the window was set with mismatched plates, a cake shaped like a wren perched on a branch, and 7 candles waiting to be lit. Elena moved through the kitchen, humming as she arranged cupcakes on a tray. She wasn't nervous, not like she used to be on birthdays past when she'd lie awake wondering if Lily would ask about her father, if the absence would feel heavier on a day meant for celebration. This year was different. This year, there was no empty chair. He arrived just after 10, carrying a wrapped gift and a bouquet of wildflowers, daisies, lavender, and something purple he couldn't name but thought Lily would like. He'd learned by now that she loved things that grew wild, not perfect. "Happy birthday to the birthday girl," he said as Lily ran to the door, still in her pajamas, hair in 2 messy braids. She threw her arms around his waist. "You came. Wouldn't miss it," he said, ruffling her hair before handing her the flowers. "For the birthday bird." She beamed and rushed to put them in a mason jar on the counter. Then she eyed the gift. "Can I open it now?" "After cake," Elena called from the kitchen, but she was smiling. He stepped inside, nodding to Elena. She wore a simple dress the color of sage leaves, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked calm, happy even, not the woman who once braced herself every time the doorbell rang. "You didn't have to bring flowers," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "I wanted to," he replied. "They reminded me of that field near the lake." "Remember?" She paused, then nodded. "I remember. It wasn't a grand gesture. Just a quiet acknowledgement that some memories were worth keeping, even the painful ones." By noon, a handful of guests had arrived. Lily's best friend from school, her teacher, Elena's mother, and a few regulars from the cafe who'd watched Lily grow up between sips of coffee and slices of pie. There was laughter, off-key singing, and the joyful chaos of children chasing each other around the bookshelves. He didn't stand apart. He helped cut cake, refilled juice cups, and even let Lily's friend braid a tiny section of his hair, for good luck. Later, when the guests had gone and the dishes were stacked in the sink, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Now can I open my present?" He sat with her on the floor by the window, sunlight warming the wood beneath them. She tore the paper carefully, as if the wrapping mattered as much as what was inside. When she saw the sketchbook, thick paper, a leather cover with a small bird embossed in gold, her eyes widened. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And the pencils?" He said, pulling out a wooden box filled with every color imaginable, "so you can draw the whole world." She hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck. "Thank you, Dad." He held her for a long moment, breathing in the scent of birthday cake and crayons. Then she pulled back, already flipping through the blank pages. On the first one, she began to draw. Elena watched from the counter, drying a mug slowly, her heart full in a way she hadn't expected. She'd spent so long protecting Lily from disappointment that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to hope. But here it was, not a fairy tale, not a perfect reunion, but something real. Messy, tender, and earned. After a while, Lily held up her drawing. It showed 4 people, a woman with long hair holding a coffee cup, a little girl with curly hair and a bird on her shoulder, an older woman with kind eyes, clearly her grandmother, and a tall man with green eyes standing beside them, one hand resting gently on the little girl's back. Above them, in careful letters, she'd written, "My family." He looked at it for a long time. Then he met Elena's eyes across the room. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic confession, just a quiet understanding passing between them. This was enough. This was more than enough. Lily hopped up and ran to the kitchen, returning with a slice of cake on a small plate. She held it out to him. "You can stay for cake, Daddy." He took it, smiling. "I'd like that." That evening, after Lily was asleep and the cafe was quiet again, he helped Elena clean up the last of the decorations. They worked in comfortable silence, folding chairs, wiping tables, blowing out the last candle. When they were done, they stood by the back door, looking out at the garden where Elena grew herbs for her teas. "You've built something beautiful here," he said. "It wasn't just me," she replied softly. "My mother helped. Friends pitched in. And now," she glanced at him, "now it feels like it's growing in a new direction." He nodded. "I don't expect us to be what we were." "I don't either," she said. "We're not those people anymore. What are we then?" She thought for a moment. "Co-parents. Friends maybe. People who care about the same little girl more than anything." He smiled. "I can live with that." She turned to go inside but paused. "You know, you could stay for dinner sometime. Just the three of us. No expectations." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the woman he'd once loved, but the woman she'd become. Strong, steady, open-hearted even after everything. "I'd like that," he said. The next week he came over for spaghetti. Lily set the table with her best plates. They ate on the small balcony, watching fireflies blink in the dusk. No one mentioned the past. They talked about Lily's school play, the new book she was reading, the way the cafe's lavender was blooming early this year. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, moments when old wounds brushed against the surface, but they kept showing up, kept trying. One afternoon, while helping reorganize the cafe's bookshelf, he found an old photo tucked inside a novel, him and Elena years ago, laughing on that same fire escape where she'd told him she was pregnant. He didn't say anything, just slipped it into his pocket. That night, he placed it on his nightstand in the small apartment he'd rented nearby, not as a reminder of what was lost, but as a marker of how far they'd come. Months passed. Seasons turned. The cafe stayed busy. Lily started second grade. He still came by every day, though now he sometimes stayed for dinner or walked her to school in the mornings. He never pushed for more than Elena was ready to give. And slowly, trust grew. Not like a sudden bloom, but like roots spreading deep in good soil. On a quiet Sunday morning, Lily sat at the counter drawing while Elena made coffee and he read the paper. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The radio played a soft jazz tune. Lily looked up, crayon in hand. "Dad?" she said. "Yeah? Are you happy here?" He lowered the paper and looked at her, really looked. At her curious eyes, her smudged cheek, the way she always tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. He thought of the empty penthouse he'd left behind, the boardrooms that echoed with hollow success, the years spent chasing a version of himself that never truly fit. Then he looked at Elena, who was watching him with quiet eyes, waiting. He smiled. "Yeah, Lily," he said. "I'm happy here." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. And in that simple moment, no grand speeches, no sweeping music, just the hum of a coffee machine and the scratch of a crayon on paper. They all knew. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new one. Not perfect. Not easy, but real. And real was enough. Because sometimes the most extraordinary things grow from the quietest acts of showing up, of staying, of choosing each other, not once, but every single day. It had been nearly a year since he first walked back into the cafe, the day Lily looked up and called him Daddy, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Now, ordinary moments were the ones that mattered most. Mornings began with the smell of coffee and the sound of Lily chattering about her dreams. Evenings ended with shared dishes and quiet conversations on the porch. Life hadn't become a fairy tale, but it had become something better, steady, honest, and full of small joys that didn't need to be shouted to be felt. He still lived in his own apartment a few blocks away, not because he didn't want to be closer, but because everyone needed space to breathe. Elena had made that clear early on. We're not rushing into anything. We're learning how to be a family, not pretending we always were. And he respected that. More than that, he understood it. One Saturday morning, rain fell in soft sheets, turning the streets into mirrors. The cafe was closed, but the three of them were inside anyway. Lily sprawled on the floor with a puzzle, Elena flipping through a cookbook and him fixing a wobbly table leg with a screwdriver he'd borrowed from the hardware store down the street. Lily looked up from her puzzle. "Dad, can you help me with this piece? It won't fit." He set down the screwdriver and sat beside her. "Let me see." He studied the jagged edge, then turned it slightly. "Try it this way," she did. It clicked into place. "You're good at puzzles." I had a lot of practice, he said with a small smile. Life's full of them. Elena glanced over, her expression soft. Some people never figure out which way the pieces go. Some people get a second chance to try, he replied, meeting her eyes. She didn't look away. For a long moment, the only sounds were the rain tapping the windows and the soft shuffle of puzzle pieces. Then Lily jumped up. I'm hungry. Can we make pancakes? Only if you help mix the batter, Elena said, closing the cookbook. I will. Lily ran to the kitchen, already pulling a stool to the counter. He followed, rolling up his sleeves. I'll handle the stove. Elena watched them, Lily standing on her tiptoes to pour milk, him carefully cracking eggs without getting shells in the bowl. It was a simple scene, one that played out in kitchens all over the world. But to her it felt like a miracle. Not because it was perfect, Lily spilled flour on the floor and he nearly burned the first pancake, but because it was real. Because it was theirs. Later, as they ate at the counter, syrup dripping from their forks, Lily said, I wish every day was Saturday. Why? Elena asked. Because everyone's here, and no one's in a hurry. He looked down at his plate, throat tight. He remembered a time when his days were measured in meetings and deadlines, when hurry was the only pace he knew. Now he measured time in Lily's laughter, in the quiet hum of the cafe after closing, in the way Elena's hand sometimes brushed his when they passed each other in the kitchen. After breakfast, he helped clean up while Lily went upstairs to get her rain boots. I'm going to feed Pip, she called down. Pip was the stray cat she'd been caring for, now more of a regular than a stray, thanks to daily scraps and a warm spot under the cafe's back steps. I'll go with you, he said. They walked out into the drizzle, the air cool and fresh. Pip appeared almost instantly, rubbing against Lily's legs with a purr. She knelt, offering a bit of leftover pancake, and the cat ate greedily. He likes you, he said. He knows I bring snacks, Lily replied with a grin. They stood there for a while, watching the rain drip from the eaves. Then Lily looked up at him. Do you think Pip misses his family? He hesitated. I don't know, but I think he's found a new one. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Back inside, Elena was wiping down the counter when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then sighed. It's the landlord. He wants to talk about renewing the lease. He frowned. Is that a problem? She shook her head. Not really, but rent's going up again. I've been thinking, maybe it's time to look for a bigger space, somewhere with room for a kid's corner, maybe even a small stage for story hour. His eyes lit up. You should. This place deserves to grow. She smiled faintly. It's just, money's tight. Without thinking, he said, I could help. She looked at him surprised. You don't have to. I know. But I want to, not as a handout. As an investment in you, in this place. She studied him for a long moment. You'd really do that? Only if you're okay with it. And only if you let me help with the build-out. I've gotten pretty good with a hammer, she laughed. A real warm laugh that made the room feel brighter. All right. But you're painting the walls. And no fancy corporate colors. We're sticking with warm yellow and sage green. Deal. That conversation sparked something new. Over the next few weeks, they looked at spaces together. Old storefronts with big windows, empty lots with potential. They sketched ideas on napkins, argued over sink placements, and dreamed out loud about bookshelves that went all the way to the ceiling. It wasn't just business. It was building something side by side, brick by brick. One evening, after a long day of measuring rooms and talking to contractors, they sat on the steps of a vacant building they both loved, a corner spot with tall windows and a little courtyard out back. Imagine it, Elena said, pointing. Outdoor seating in the summer. Fairy lights in the trees. And a reading nook right there, he added, gesturing to a sunny corner, with a big armchair and a blanket basket. Lily, who'd been drawing in her sketchbook, looked up. And a bird feeder, so the wrens come visit. They both smiled. Later, as they walked home in the fading light, Elena said, You've changed, you know. How so? You used to talk about square footage and profit margins. Now you talk about bird feeders and blanket baskets. He chuckled. Turns out those things matter more. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, I'm glad you stayed. He stopped walking and turned to her. I'm glad you let me. They stood there for a moment, the street quiet around them. No grand gesture, no kiss, no declaration. Just two people who'd been through fire and found their way back to something that felt like home. The new cafe opened 6 months later. They called it the Wren and Whisk, Second Flight. The space was warm and bright with mismatched chairs, shelves full of books, and a small stage where Lily now read stories to younger kids every Saturday. He'd helped build the counter with his own hands, sanded the tables until they gleamed, and hung the bird feeders himself. On opening day, the place was packed. Regulars from the old cafe came, along with new faces drawn in by the buzz. Lily wore a little apron and proudly handed out cookies she'd baked with her grandmother. Elena moved through the crowd with calm confidence, her eyes shining with quiet pride. He stood near the back, watching it all. He didn't need to be at the center. He was exactly where he wanted to be, on the edges, holding space, making sure everything ran smoothly. At one point, Elena found him by the kitchen door. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For believing in this." "In me," he shook his head. "You did all the hard work. I just handed you tools," she smiled. "You stayed? That was the hardest part." Later that night, after the last guest had left and the lights were dimmed, the three of them sat at the big new counter with mugs of hot chocolate. Lily was half asleep, head resting on her arms, sketchbook open to a new drawing. The new cafe, filled with people. Birds flying in through the open door. Elena reached across the table and touched his hand, just for a second. Just enough to say what words couldn't. He didn't pull away. Outside, the city hummed softly. Rain began to fall again, gentle and steady. But inside, it was warm, safe, full. And for the first time in a long time, no one was waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were just here together. Not because of the past, but because of the future they were choosing. One ordinary, beautiful day at a time.